So Supreme Darkness comes out this week, and with it, the format changes. Hey guys, Otaku here, back with another meta tier list. So today we're going to be talking about the upcoming format of Supreme Darkness, because as of this week of recording this video, Supreme Darkness will be dropping. Now, Supreme Darkness isn't really changing the format a whole lot. It is not designed to. It is one of those sets that kind of plays on top of the already pre-existing format, whereas Alliance Insight will probably be more heavily meta-defining rather than Supreme Darkness. But there are still some really cool things, and also there will be some minor meta shifts, but overall, we're just going to be talking about what's going on. But before we do, I have noticed that about 90% of you that watch my videos are not currently subscribed to the channel, so if you like competitive related content, tier lists, or even deck lists, consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and also leaving a comment down below. But with that, let's just jump on in. All right, so for this tier list, we are only going to be talking about the decks that have been topping as of late, decks that are getting support or slightly being modified with the upcoming Supreme Darkness releases. Just overall, we're talking about what's been going on in the meta, but what is also possibly changing in the upcoming meta. Our tiers are best deck. These are the decks that are going to basically be ruling the format. If there is only one deck up here, that does not mean we are in a tier 0 format by any means. It just means it is still just the best deck. Strong picks, these are the decks that can contend with the meta. They don't necessarily have to be like anti-meta. They are just very strong and powerful decks, and maybe budget friendly. Rogue is Rogue. I don't really got to describe it from there. And then Stop Coping. These are decks that you just don't play. They're not worth the time of day. We're going to rip the band-aid off here, and we're going to just immediately put Ryzeal and Malice in the best decks. Ryzeal has currently two different builds that are consistently topping, with one predicted to be arguably the best version of the deck, which is the Mitsurugi. We have Pure Ryzeal, Ryzeal Fiendsmith, which has been kind of the top dog in the current format. And then Mitsurugi is being rumored to possibly be the best form of the deck. I have personally played against it. It is a very, very strong powerhouse. The Mitsurugi cards are like really crazy in the sense that not only do they set up a almost impossible to break end board with the Ryzeal cards, but also on top of that, if you do break it and you don't kill them, they do set up crackback. As for Malice, there's only two builds I really want to talk about, and that is the Sky Striker and Fiendsmith build. The Cash build has kind of fallen off, and Pure isn't doing nearly as much. Both these builds are allowing Malice to play under Lancia a lot more. However, with the incoming of the Molcharmy Meowls, there's a good chance that Malice will take a big hit. It just depends on how much play we see Meowls perform in the upcoming format. That being said, when it comes between Ryzeal and Malice, Ryzeal is unfortunately just the better version of both of them, because Malice just can't play going second nearly as often. They have to play very specific like board breakers, but not too many, so that way they can still play the game. Stuff like Book of Eclipse. Whereas like Ryzeal can play going second because they run the Fiendsmith cards. Malice has to play very specific extension cards to be able to play second, and even then it's not always enough. All right, so now that we have the best decks in the format out of the way, it's time to move on to everybody else. Centurion, I think, is going to take a bit of a back seat, just like it has in the current format. Ever since Detonator has become a thing, a lot of decks just struggle to play around Detonator specifically because he is not a once per turn nor a once per chain pop. And Centurion is no exception. Centurion pretty much relies on getting their monsters from the back row into the main monster zone, and Detonator can prevent that from happening. So because of that, Detonator is just kind of gatekeeping the Centurion out of the format. I'm going to do my best to not be biased here. However, I do think that the Chimera Fiendsmith Azumina is a very powerful deck in this current format, mainly because the new Elzette from the White Forest card is pretty crazy, and it is the perfect bridge for the Chimera build to finally be able to bridge into the Sinful Spoils package. One thing about Chimera Azumina Fiendsmith was that it always kind of just played Chimera Fiendsmith, and if it saw Diabellstar or Deception, then it would play Azumina cards. But now that the new LZ is out, they are able to search Sinful Spell cards like the Wanted or the Deception to be able to bridge into that, and because it's an illusion, it's really easy to search. In my last tier list, I addressed the concerns that Chimera is going to struggle because Shifter is like the ultimate killer to Chimera, especially with Fiendsmith and Azumina being in the package. However, we are seeing Shifter kind of pushed a little bit out of side decks and even out of main decks simply because the best two decks in the format don't care about Shifter. And because of this, the only real threat Chimera has to worry about now is Droll and Lockbird, and if you do get hit with Droll and Lockbird, then you can just set up Fiendsmith plays. And it's because of this that I do think that Chimera Fiendsmith Azumina is a really, really strong pick in this current format, because just like Malice, Chimera sets up perfect end boards if it's uninterrupted. to be able to make it so you just can't break their board. So they essentially just win going first if they are not interrupted. But also on top of that, Chimera has a very strong ability to play through several forms of interaction and still set up a very strong end board, just like Malice. And very similar to Malice, Chimera struggles going second, which is why I can't put this in a best deck tier because it struggles going second, and it will be no exception to being gatekept by Detonator. For Crystron, I'm going to be a little bit ignorant here. I don't know enough about these cards to really truly rate them based on my own personal opinion, but a lot of very reliable content creators that I trust wouldn't just lie to their viewers say that this deck is going to be very strong. Like I said, I personally don't know much about the cards. I've only read them when they were first revealed, and I haven't read them again since, but I'm going to have to say that it's going to be a strong pick just based on what others are saying. A lot of people are saying that it is going to have the ability to play through several forms of interaction, set up very strong going second boards, and also very strong going first board. But in terms of my tier list, take this with a grain of salt, figure it out on your own, make your own personal judgment when it comes to Crystron. That being said, if you are a Crystron player and you're looking forward to playing the brand new support, comment down below truly how good this deck is going to be or how bad it's going to be. Arcana Force, I don't need to talk about this. Just stop coping. If you're looking forward to playing Arcana Force, more power to you. I encourage you to play your favorite deck if Arcana Force is your favorite deck, but do not expect to be performing very well with this deck in the current meta, or really any meta. Gladiator Beast, I also have to kind of put in a stop coping. I'm not overly familiar with the old Gladiator Beasts. I do know that they had a battle phase gimmick where they would attack, and then they would tag out, and then attack and tag out, etc., etc. And then they later got more support down the road, which kind of changed their identity into more of a combo deck. And now the new support is trying to backtrack and go more into the battle phase gimmicky kind of style deck that it used to be. But if you want a battle phase gimmick deck, just play Tenpai. The Gladiator Beast players can, rage at me in the comments all they want. I don't think this deck really, with the new support, is going to really do much. But at the same time, feel free to prove me wrong. Go ahead, top a YCS with this, and I will eat my words. Heroes are kind of the main attraction of Supreme Darkness, with the cover card being a brand new Neos. And the problem here is that it doesn't solve any of Heroes' current existing problems. The new support gives the deck more consistency in a weird way. However, it also requires them to play like 2 more Garnets that they don't need because they already play like 3 Garnets as it is. And on top of that, they do get an Omni Negate of sorts, but Nibiru exists, and that's kind of like Heroes' ultimate demise is Nibiru. And on top of that, Droll Knockbird is very prevalent in the format, and Heroes like to add cards and draw cards. And because of that, I don't think Heroes are seeing much of a change in the upcoming format. Again, I know that Heroes has a massive fan base, some of which are my own friends, but you have to just realize that I don't think the hero support is going to do enough. Now, that is my own personal opinion. I'm willing to be wrong on that. It's just based on what I've seen a lot of end boards and testing with the new hero cards, and again, the new support does not solve the issues that Heroes have been facing for the last couple years. Kashtira Fiendsmith, still a strong pick. This is still a very strong deck. The Kashtira cards punish any sort of interaction your opponent tries to do against you. You play like 21 plus hand traps. The Fiendsmith cards are just incredibly powerful. There's not much to say about this deck. It's just very strong because it plays a bunch of non-engine to prevent your opponent from building a board, and then Kashtira and Fiendsmith are 2 very powerful engines that are designed to put up bodies on the board, break boards, and kill for game. Labyrinth, this is mainly like Labyrinth Fiendsmith at this point, and this is also a strong pick. Labyrinth is doing like really cool stuff. It's one of the few like trap decks that can kind of play under Detonator right now. But at the same time, like, this deck actually, funny enough, won the regional I went to, and I posted a video for that regional like 2 weeks ago. This deck is very strong. The problem with the Labyrinth Fiendsmith deck is it does require a very, very talented pilot. Ever since the birth of Labyrinth, Labyrinth has been a more high ceiling deck. It rewards higher technical play from the pilot that is playing the deck. I would not recommend that if you haven't been playing this deck for like the last year to pick it up randomly and take it to the next YCS. I would not recommend that. But if this is a deck you are very familiar with, if this is one of your favorite decks, you still stand a very good shot in the current format because Labyrinth is just very, very powerful at keeping the board under control, and the Fiendsmith cards further expedite that. Mermails are getting more support in Supreme Darkness, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Water has been slowly getting like pushed out of the current format because one of their best cards banishes a card from hand, and if you're going against a Malice player, that's not a good thing. But also on top of that, just the Mermail deck loses too many forms of interaction. They're currently popular in the current format. Shifter is slowly making his way out of the format, but any Shifter deck that hits this deck will just, for the most part, win. Droll and Lockbird, again, is very powerful. This deck does a lot of adding from the deck, not as much drawing. And Nibiru, if they can't get up a Toad quick enough, then Nibiru is going to punish this deck hard. And they have a lot of forms of extension and a lot of cards that are not once per turn. I just don't think that it's enough. And the new support, again, does not solve that nearly as much. They can get Toad up quicker, but Toad's not nearly as scary as some of, other decks' form of interaction. Millennium, I think, is still just like a fine deck. There's nothing wrong with this deck. It's a very low to the ground rogue deck. It's able to put up like a spell negate. It can play the Secret Village of Spellcasters, which is like just a lock for many decks in the current format. They have the ability to play Shifter. They're able to just dump a bunch of bodies on the board. It's just a good deck. Like, it's not crazy. It's a good rogue deck, and it's fairly budget. Mitsurugi as a deck alone, I'm putting it in stop coping for right now. I think in terms of first wave for TCG exclusives, this is probably one of the better first waves we've gotten in a long time. But as a solo deck on its own, not yet. It's not ready. We'll have to see what that second wave looks like in the next core set. So for now, Mitsurugi, we're just going to keep it as an engine in the Ryziel deck and maybe some other random decks. Memento, this is a deck that just keeps getting like kicked under the rug. Like, everyone just forgets to talk about Memento, or even just forgets to prepare for it or think about it, because it's random. It's a very powerful deck, and I think just like Labyrinth, it heavily rewards a good pilot and good technical play. But this deck has a very strong ability to just play through boards, and sure enough, they like getting popped, so, Detonator isn't like as threatening. They have the ability to dodge like target effects, and they set up a very powerful turn 1 board, especially if they're playing the Fiendsmith cards on top of that. It's just a very threatening deck. However, again, just like many other decks in the current format, it does kind of die to Shifter. Droll hurts it a little bit, not a whole lot. And just like very well-timed banishes from like a white binder is enough to just clonk this deck out. So we're seeing some new support for the Primite cards coming out in Supreme Darkness, and we have seen the database get updated back to its original text for Barrel Dragon. So it will not be triggering on every standby phase like it was mistranslated for the TCG. However, even with that, I think there's a weird world where Primite Fiendsmith could exist. I'm going to put it in like stop coping for now, but like keep it like in your thoughts, right? Because White Duston is a light fiend normal monster, which means it appeals to both the Fiendsmith and the Primite cards. So it is something that is possible. Whether it actually gets played, it gets experimented with, or any of that is, possible, but also unlikely. But it's just like something to think about. Rescue Ace is, I think, still like an okay pick. Rescue Ace is still a powerful deck, and Rescue Ace Fiendsmith is like Dollar General version of Snake Eye Fiendsmith. So I think it's still like a pretty okay pick. You could put it at like bottom of Strong Pick and top of Rogue. This is like probably like a tier 3, maybe like bottom tier 2 deck. It's still like has high potential of performing. I think it rewards good pilots. The issue here is again, a well-timed white binder or just a detonator is like enough to just clonk this deck out. So again, it's just a strong pick. You just have to know what you're doing. Ritual Beasts are slowly getting pushed out of the format. One, because the deck heavily relies off of like banishing and stuff, and because of that, thanks to Malice's sins, we are seeing Lancia all over the place, which means that kind of covers multiple matchups if you're going up against the Ritual Beasts. Now, Ritual Beasts can just set up Protoss, called Light, and sure enough, you have the Ryziel Fiendsmith deck on lock, or you call Dark and you have Malice on lock. But then you have side engines in both of those decks. If you call Dark against Malice, sure, they can't play Malice, but they can play Fiendsmith. Sure, you call Light against Ryziel, they can't play Ryziel, but they can play Mitsurugi because Mitsurugis are Dark. So it really just depends. I think the Ritual Beasts will slowly start seeing their way out of the current format, but also on top of that, the Molcharming Meows will kind of put this deck on a bit of a lock. And again, that's another thing we have to consider. is that how much play will Meowth see, because that could change this entire tier list completely. Another strong pick, and probably like the best of the strong picks, is the Tenpai Fiendsmith deck. Pure Tenpai is complete trash. It has been too hit on the consistency that it just cannot perform, but Tenpai Fiendsmith performs very well, and it's very good at setting up turn 1 boards. This is actually the version of the deck that prefers to go first, and then when they prevent you from setting up a board, then they will just kill you with Tenpai on the crackback. Tenyi support, I have to say, stop coping. The issue with Supreme Darkness is that a lot of the support for legacy decks it's just not enough. We're seeing stuff for Heroes, Tenyi, Gladiator Beast, Arcana Force, and it's just not enough. Some of the more favored support is obviously the Cristrons and the White Forest, but that's really it. And then everything else is very underwhelming, and Tenyi is no exception. I think that the Sword Soul Tenyi deck will see a boost in power, but I don't think it's going to be enough to compete in the current format. Voiceless, we're going to have to put it in Rogue. I think this deck is still one of the best turn 1 end boards we have seen in a long time, just having the Omni Negate. But where this deck struggles, and I mean really struggles, is going second, especially in the current format. You just activate Prayers, or you activate Blessing, or you activate Radiance, and Detonator pops. You ritual summon into Skull Guardian using Low, and you go Skull Guardian 1, Low 2, and then Detonator pops the Skull Guardian before Low can hit the board. This deck really struggles against Thrizeal matchup, and Thrizeal is everywhere, unfortunately. So because of that, I think Voiceless is just kind of seeing the end of its days, at least for now. We might see support later on down the road in maybe late 2025, or, you know, maybe not for a while. But overall, this deck, I think, is seeing the end of its time, especially at least in this next format. White Forest is seeing a big boost. Saint Azamina is a pretty crazy card, but also just the new LZ is really crazy. I mentioned it just a minute ago in the Chimera deck, but this is just a very good line of support for the deck, and we're seeing even more support in Alliance Insight, which will make the deck even more powerful. I think White Forest has a very decent chance of performing in the upcoming format. Maybe not crazy. We could put it technically in Rogue. Saint Azamina is just, it really comes down to how often and how consistent are they going to be able to get Saint Azamina onto the board, because Saint Azamina can just completely shut out cards like Heart Cryptor or Plugin. But also at the same time, this deck has the ability to quick synchro into a Book of Eclipse, which is Silvera, which, as we see, Book of Eclipse seeing a lot of play because it shuts out the 2 best decks into establishing a board. So I think this deck is pretty okay. It just depends on whether you're playing it pure or runic. It just, a lot of stuff depends on what you are playing, who's playing it, etc., etc. And for the last deck, I think Yubel's still an okay deck. Like, I hate playing against Yubel more than the next guy, but Yubel is still, like, okay. They have 3 Spirit Gates now. Sure, they have only 1 Phantom of Yubel, but, you know, don't waste it. Don't just use it as link material, or, you know, use it on the first form of interaction. Most of the time, you're going to want to save it for the incoming Nibiru. However, the deck is just pretty good into the Raizo matchup. You just activate cards, and if he pops your Yubel cards, okay, summon another Yubel. Now, by no means do I want more people playing Yubel. I'm just saying I think it still stands a pretty good chance in this current format. So, you know, strong pick. And that's all I really have for the Supreme Darkness meta tier list. Like I said, it's not really changing a whole lot from the current format. Supreme Darkness is one of those core sets that's not trying to warp the format entirely like we saw in, for the most part, all of 2024. This is more a low to the ground, like the Cyberstorm Axis core set from 2023. It's very low to the ground. It's just building on to the current format, trying to extend further from what we have already been playing, but also give some love to some old legacy decks. But I want to hear what you all think down in the comments below, so don't forget to leave a like on this video. Comment down below maybe a deck that I missed or didn't give enough love to, or just maybe didn't talk about enough or missed a very crucial point that could have changed its rating. But also, if you're not already and you like competitive-based content, consider subscribing to the channel so I can continue to make videos like this one. But with that, I'll see you all in the next video. See ya.